So this video is about an important topic which often PhD students and students in general struggle with in terms of ensuring quality criteria for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. And while I was doing my own research, I also had to dig deep in terms of what sort of resources are there? Are there any resources that would help PhD students to make sure that the research, if you are doing transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary research, they are solid, they are rigor, they ensure quality. And while I was doing my PhD, I wanted to know if there are any quality criteria out there, if my research fits within, that kind of realm of research, if you like. And I came across this very useful, actually, document, which was produced by two researchers called Mitchell and Willits. And it is called Quality Criteria for Inter- and Transdisciplinary Doctoral Research Outcomes. And it was prepared for the what they call ALTC Fellowship, Zen and the Art Transdisciplinary Postgraduate Studies for the University of Technology, Sydney. And I have to put a disclaimer that I studied at the University of Technology, Sydney. So this research was prepared for the university, but it is publicly available and you can access it using the reference that I've included on this slide. So I do have the document with me here. It was produced in 2009, so you have to factor in it's been a while, and there could be other resources that are equally useful, but I found this to be the most direct, the most useful, because it is directed at PhD students. And it will give you an idea while you are doing your research, if you think it fits within ID or transdisciplinary research, then this could be useful for you. So just a general, information, for your information, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research are all becoming essential. Although I feel like they are part of a realm of different types of research out there. And they are becoming useful because more and more researchers are using them to address big problems in our society, like, for example, climate change, dealing with poverty, improving equity, and many other areas as well. And it is, in a way, also are being used to involve different stakeholders, by the way, together. So different professionals, researchers, and people or the public, and so on. Although that is, it depends on how you look at this type of cross-disciplinary research in general. So the authors mentioned that quality frames for interdisciplinary research and transdisciplinary research are less well developed at the time when they wrote this piece, because their nature is to juxtapose different epistemologies, making the process of determining quality fraught. And because they are young, extracting what differentiates this work is being developed. But again, you have to take it that this document was developed in 2009. So there is a gap. They identify a gap in terms of, quality, ensuring quality control for this type of research. And the students need to produce a thesis, they mentioned, that will pass examination and papers that will be published. So examiners, they also target in this paper, they also target examiners of this kind of research and this kind of thesis. And these need guidance. So they are providing guidance for PhD students as well as examiners that deal with interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research from different disciplinary backgrounds. So the document, what they say is that it seeks to explore and describe appropriate interpretations of broad quality criteria for evaluating interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. So I'm skipping the other parts. There is a lot of information in the document that you're more than welcome to read, and I'm focusing on what sort of things you can benefit from. So in terms of the scope of the document, this is important. The focus here, as I mentioned, is on doctoral research or third cycle in what they call European terms. And they also include within the scope the spectrum of doctoral research from conventional as well as practice-oriented theses. So this is useful to know. They also limit their focus, and this in the document to some summative evaluation and assessment of a thesis as a product. Okay. And they see interdisciplinary research here as combining theories and generating knowledge and insights from different disciplinary frames with a practical problem-solving intent, while they see transdisciplinary research as including the spectrum of qualitative and quantitative evidence from the spectrum of epistemological domains, which means going beyond interdisciplinary research and questioning disciplinary knowledge, generating new methods and insights, and including a legitimacy of lay knowledge. So again, this is how they interpret interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research for your information, but you have to keep in mind there could be other interpretations of both of these terms or type of research out there. Okay, so they also go in their document about the approach and the methodology that they use to come up with this quality criteria, and also how do interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research, doctoral research differ from other types of research, which could be useful for you, that you can read at your own time. And also, so I'm going to go straight into the synthesis, the broad and generic quality criteria that both researchers used for your information, because that's the whole gist of this video. Okay, so what do the generic quality criteria mean in the context of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research? And they go through these from page 9 of their document. So they divided these into different sections. And the first one that I will talk about is substantial original contribution to knowledge. So the main concern, they talk about the main concern with substantial, with what knowledge means, and they go through that. And they also, something that you need to know is that they also sat down with supervisors and they asked them different questions before they came up with this document. And they show in their document what supervisors' vision was about each of these quality criteria and what they mean. So I'll give you some examples about some of these and what supervisors or examiners looked at as well. So think about each discipline or standpoint as needing to be engaged with a depth that, as a minimum, enables its artifacts, which they defined as theoretical frameworks, methodologies, methods, analytical frameworks, etc., to be applied with integrity. In addition to that, what they see as substantial original contribution to knowledge is that the idea of impact of research extends the coverage of the thesis beyond disciplines and epistemological stances to the areas of their application, such as industry sectors or organizational processes, government policies and their implementation, etc., such that the outcomes of the thesis mesh well enough to influence decisions and actions in that space. So this is how they defined impacts of that is coming out of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research and how it should be. Okay, also what they talked about is that what is clear is an incumbent on interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary students to be forceful explicit and clear about the nature and extent of their contribution in terms of additions and or shifts to knowledge and practice in broad terms that comes out of your research in the thesis, in your project. Okay. They also commented on the originality of the contribution of your research and what that means within interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. They construed original in a variety of ways, and that could be the particular synthesis or integration of existing knowledge. So no one else has combined knowledge in the way that you did as a student. Or as one examiner noted, the major contribution of this thesis is its extensive and synthetic critical review across a number of fields. Also, they noted that originality could come from the research problem and justification, or introducing a new perspective, or because it is they who are constructing and holding the piece. That is, approaches where the researcher's experience is foregrounded are always original. So they also noted contributions to practice, creative contributions as valid. So to summarize, both Mitchell and Willits in their quality control paper, what they suggested under this quality criteria of substantial original contributions to knowledge, they see this criteria as original and creative contribution to knowledge and or practice for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research as important, as crucial, as a quality control measure. Okay. The second quality control measure, criterion that they talked about was that the research has to be well designed and structured and has a structured, coherent argument. So transdisciplinary research is all about argument. Argument is fundamental. And and also when you are bringing in material from multiple disciplines, synthesis and integration becomes critical. So also another thing to think about is that you are able to tell a story that navigates diverse conceptual, methodological, and empirical territories within your thesis. Also, they gave an example of candidates that have synthesized a broad set of academic and professional literature to develop cognate treatment of the difficult problem of something. And the thesis is a substantial and wide-ranging than most others they've seen, that the examiners have seen or the supervisors have seen. And it covers a wide variety of related, a wide range of related phenomena in a systematic and coherent way. So both authors comment that there is a need for the student to actually define the framework, your conceptual framework for assessing coherence in your research. And in transdisciplinary research in particular, they commented that there is a dance between observer, process, and observation that should be evident in your thesis. And also be aware about coherence and the idea of coherence, which is extracted by the idea that the thesis should show that you have explicitly thought about contradictions, convergences, so similarities and differences, and you have actively engaged with and recognized issues of ambiguity and complexity that inevitably come up in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. You cannot run, unfortunately, from that. It's part of the whole part of the research or this type of research. So in conclusion, you have to be critically aware and you have to have coherent argument. These stands as essential criterion for differentiating quality interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. Okay. Now, the third quality criteria for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research that both authors talked about was engaging critically with literature of appropriate breadth and depth. So there needs to be a balance that you do between breadth and depth in your research, and critiquing and synthesizing outside of your own discipline. Okay, so to keep the depth manageable in your research, the focus should be on key texts. So a step beyond texts that are merely, they say, relevant to a focus on early source and or transformative texts, to follow the idea along the branch and back to the trunk, as they put it, as some of the examiners or some of the supervisors put it to them. So as a student, you have to demonstrate your grasp of key debates, and in doing so, to argue for that which is included and that which is not in terms of the literature, to make sure you have heard a range of voices relevant to the topic and understood key positions. Okay, so this is something that I've also struggled with because my research kind of sat in between interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research, and I had to, and the nature of my topic was very broad. It involved so many different disciplines, as well as so many different terms that researchers unfortunately have used. So that took me a while to actually get a grip in terms of the breadth, in terms of what is out there, the literature, in terms of the frameworks out there, in terms of what the researchers are talking about the topic, and ensuring that I've covered enough breadth, but also focus on the main relevant researchers or the main relevant points that are of substance that would help progress my research to the next level, which is the research methodology and so on. So the two authors mentioned that there is generally a criticism about insufficient understanding of concepts or literature used. So I'll give you an example of that, something to be mindful of. When I got my examiner comments, there where I was, before I submitted my thesis for examination, I was aware and I was ready mentally to get a lot of comments, about, oh, you didn't cover this person, you didn't cover that person, and this is normal and you have to be ready for it, especially if you are doing this kind of research, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, or if you are in general crossing different disciplinary boundaries. So be prepared that certain examiners, because they come from certain backgrounds, they're very strong. They have a grasp of certain literature, of certain researchers out there, and they might tell you didn't cover this, you didn't cover that. So just be ready. And there is no, it's actually difficult with this type of research to tick everything that the examiner wants you to tick. So back to this paper, the difficulty that the authors recognize is that there's a difficulty in establishing credibility with the audience. Critical and appropriate will have different meanings to different audiences, as I just mentioned with my example. They note that there is a need to be convincing to an audience. Okay. So that comes through both the choice of sources that you make as a student and the treatment of those sources as well. How do you treat them? How do you use them? So also in terms of transdisciplinarity in particular, the authors mentions that perhaps in terms of the disciplines, these could be best dealt with through demonstrating the capacity to interrogate literature from across epistemological perspectives. In addition, as students, you must demonstrate capacity to not just interrogate and provide critiques of different literatures, but also you must synthesize across them. And which is they recognize is a demanding task in and by itself. Okay. And they recognize that there is a challenge of engaging across literatures, but there is an opportunity to see issues in one discipline from another discipline's perspective. And this may strengthen criticality, as they call it. Okay. So also something to be mindful of on this point is that the scope and role of engaging with existing literature, in terms of that, the literature should establish a context and position the research as addressing a need. So for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary work, this means engaging with the literature and practice or situation or sector in ways that demonstrate being both up-to-date as well as being substantive. So in terms of this criteria, again, to recap, it is important and critical to engage critically and pluralistically with appropriate literature, artifacts, the research context, and multiple perspectives within it. Now moving on to the fourth criterion, quality criterion for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research that the authors mentioned is around evidence of critical reflexivity on your own work. Okay? This is very critical. So since process, they talked about process as being key to interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research or work, the opportunity to demonstrate critical reflection and reflexivity seems to be in bringing the process to the front. And this could be through a specific reflective voice that shows explicit engagement with the process of research across disciplines and the challenges or insights that they bring. So think about that. Think about how you can include specific reflective voice that reflect on the process that you've done within your own thesis. So apologies, I'm just taking a sip of a drink. So what does that mean? So some comments that the supervisors made or examiners made on this is that you need to acknowledge limitations of your work. You need to acknowledge the internal processes of you as a researcher that you made. You need to demonstrate the ability to question or be tentative about the history of the research. You need to have an ability to question your own focus, your own writing methodology, and you have to have an ability to offer alternative perspectives as well, or acknowledge them at least. And even in the use of first person, you can use that in your reflections. And you have to. So in general, you have to articulate your position as a researcher, as a student, and also its relativity to other positions and the impact on the choices that you make in theory, methodology, data collection, analysis, and communication. And that depend on foregrounding and the background that you do within your thesis. And again, I've done this in my own thesis. I had what I called reflexive moments, reflexive sections under each chapter that I've done, where I reflected on, for example, methodology. I reflected on methodological choices that I've made. I reflected on the literature. I reflected on, for example, the analysis that I've done. I reflected on even the way that I've done my thesis itself, that I didn't choose to do. I chose a conventional thesis rather than a thesis by publication. But my conventional thesis also included publications that I've made. But in general, it was a conventional thesis. And why did I make that choice? And so on. So you can use these things to your reflexive and reflections to incorporate these within your own thesis. The fifth quality criterion that both Mitchell and Willits recommended is a grasp of theoretical perspectives, and a grasp of methodology. So in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research, it is likely that at least some aspects of the theoretical framework and methodology will come up. They will emerge, as they called it, and evolve during the process of the project. What does that mean? They will be developed and forged in the course of your work, rather than taken off the shelf and applied. Okay? So, and in terms of that, there should be an alignment between ontology, epistemology, theoretical perspective, methodology, methods, data analysis, interpretation, and the claims that you made. And all of this needs to match the nature of the inquiry space that you are functioning within, that you're doing your research within, in order to provide useful outcomes into that space. So you need to have a look at theoretical, you need to a grasp of theoretical perspectives of your methodology, and you need to show that in your thesis. So the choices that you made all the way, okay? So a critical understanding of methodology from different fields enables you as a student to justify your research design choices. So think about including something like that in your methodology chapter. This may well be a publishable outcome by itself, by the way. And a minimum that they say is for the thesis to demonstrate a clear audit trail to explain how you arrived at the outcome. Again, I've done this in my own thesis. I've done an audit trail about the choices that I made, the theoretical framework that I've done, which was a new thing by itself because it involved a combination of different theoretical concepts from the literature, and also about the methodology that I've done. So the analysis that I've done, there was always an audit trail that I've done of all the choices that I made, all the changes that I made, and so on. So under this criterion, they propose an alignment there should be an alignment between epistemology, theory, methodology, claims, and inquiry space. Okay? Now, that brings us to point number 6. Quality criterion number 6 is the mastery of the topic, field, or skills and methods. Okay? So, they feel there is a tension. They talked about a tension between creativity and mastery, and between curiosity and mastery that are detrimental to interdisciplinary as well as transdisciplinary postgraduate work. And that mastery might be an overclaim. So the consensus that they talked about between supervisors and examiners was that it is likely to be disabling in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research when connected to the idea of a topic. Okay, so something important to keep in mind, that mastery of a topic, it could be overestimated. And how to ensure that there is something like that reflected through your thesis. So they talked about the idea of mastery of process that emerges from several, that is in terms of reflexivity, in criticality, they say, in application of the theory and methodology, and finally in the communication that you do. And these need to be clear, and they need to be clever. So you need to be a clever communicator, a master of communication, in fact, to convey and convince, or even a master of language and style to achieve mastery of process in narrative-based work. Okay, so work on that. Work on the communication, the language, to show your mastery of the work and the research that you've done overall. Okay, so this criteria is really about mastery for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary postgraduate work. Which is about the mastery of the process and or outcome spaces for that kind of research. Now, the 7th and the final quality criterion that Mitchell and Willits talked about was that the focus is it's about effective and well-finished presentation of the thesis. So in disciplinary examinations, they explained it seems to be on the micro level that you focus your research in terms of sentence structure, typographical errors, and stuff like that. But for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary theses, these are important. This macro level is taken as read, and effective communication assumes a much greater level of importance adds. So although these are important, but there is a lot of emphasis on the macro level. Okay, so the macro and what they call the macro and meta levels, because students need to produce a compelling multilingual arguments. And if you need more information about what micro and micro and macro levels mean about thesis structural writing, I've done a separate video about how to structure a thesis in general and how to write a thesis academically that you can refer to, and it's very useful. It will give you a straightforward idea about each one of these levels of your thesis. Okay, so you need to be able to avoid jargon that will confuse non-specialist examiners, at the same time as being able to retain the intent and the integrity behind the specific meaning terms you have in particular contexts. Also, as a student, you have to demonstrate that you have understood the importance of communicating to a diverse audience. Okay, so try to use figures, try to use diagrams, and use clear, well-explained graphics. This will not only help to clarify, but also requires you as a writer to make explicit, quiet, fundamental assumptions of the arguments and implications of your findings. Okay, so it is as a summary for ID and TD thesis, ensure an elegant, even beautiful thesis that is effective in communication for diverse audiences. So I hope this video gave you an idea about quality criteria for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary doctoral research outcomes.